there are many areas in business where a completely new approach to doing things is fantastic. Finance is not one of those areas.
I love that.
I could assure you, any challenge you're facing in finance, someone you know has faced it before in almost a similar way, and you can tap into that knowledge. Avail yourself of the wisdom of others.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
What's up, everybody? CJ Gustafson, Run the Numbers podcast. I got to admit, I am pretty scarred right now. I had to take a solo trip to Home Goods at 9 p.m. last night. Went to Home Goods by myself. That place gives me anxiety. Not a place I want to go back to. Probably won't sponsor this podcast, but many of you out there probably have been left in the corner by your significant other on a lazy boy in Home Goods. I had to go there and actually purchase something. I bought a rug because the echo in this new office was pretty bad. So hopefully it's not echoing a ton. I got off the phone with Kingsley Afemikhe, the CFO of Shield AI. And this was one of the more fascinating conversations because I knew nothing about the defense tech industry. What a cool gig. You get to tell people that you're the CFO of a company that flies fighter jets completely autonomously. Pretty neat to tell people on the soccer field when you're with your kids. We talk about the biggest difference between the autonomous vehicle market and the autonomous flying market. We go over the state of the defense industry today and how much of it is being advanced by private tech companies like Shield AI, Anduril, Palantir, others. He talks about how Shield AI makes money, who its customers are, what their TAM is, and how you grow and manage a hardware/software interface business. There are a lot of startups coming up today who not only have the software component, which like you can't touch, but very expensive things that you can. There are a lot of inventory considerations. I wouldn't know what to do with inventory if it hit me in the face. So I had a lot of very, very smart questions on that one. And we talk about how Kingsley and his team embed finance into operational decision-making day to day. Kingsley also comes to us with an extensive background in deal making. He was in investment banking for a while and he did a lot of really neat deals internationally. We talk about the art of making deals internationally when there are cultural aspects at play. In reading the room from when you're proposing something. Kingsley goes over this concept of a personal board of directors, and he describes how he built it, how he went about it, and found mentors that help him still to this day. And then we touch on how we think careers will change with the advent of AI. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Mercury knows your financial operations are complex. Founders and finance teams have to pull together different tools, reconcile transactions from different sources, and struggle to get accurate answers. With Mercury, you can simplify your operations with banking and software that power your critical financial workflows, all within the one thing every business needs, a bank account. And with new bill pay and accounting capabilities, you can pay bills faster, stay in control of company spend, and speed up reconciliation. Apply in minutes at Mercury.com and join over 200,000, ambitious startups that trust Mercury to provide the precision, control, and focus they need to transform their financial workflows so they can perform at their best. Mercury, the art of simplified finances. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group and Evolve Bank and Trust. Members FDIC. I'm getting good at that voice. What does the future hold for business? Can someone invent a crystal ball? Until then, over 38,000 businesses, that's a lot of companies, have future-proofed their business with NetSuite by Oracle, the #1 cloud ERP, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one platform. With real-time insights and forecasting, you're able to peer into the future and seize new opportunities. Download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning for free at netsuite.com/metrics. That's netsuite.com/metrics. METRICS, metrics. Please, guys, I really need this. Kingsley, welcome to the Run the Numbers podcast.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking to John McCauley, who's the CFO of Calendly, and he was saying that when he goes to like one of his kids' soccer games and the parents are like, "What do you do for work?" And he says, "Oh, I'm the CFO of Calendly." Everyone's like, "Wow, that is so cool." He had the position for like coolest job title to tell people until I think I met you. So your company makes autonomous jets. Can you take us through that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm the CFO of Shield AI, and what we do is we put autonomy on a range of platforms mostly for the defense industry. So our core software is called HiMind, and we've put HiMind on Nova, which is our first smaller drone, on the VBAT, which is our vertical takeoff and landing drone, and also on jets. We've done a range of really cool things on jets, including flying the Secretary of Defense on some of our jets. We're doing a lot of work with a range of companies. What's exciting about what we do is jets are complex engineering instruments, and to have them running fully autonomous in our software is pretty phenomenal.
I'm supposed to ask a bunch of business model questions, but I need to ask, how fast do these things go?
Yeah, no, I mean, as you can expect, they can go, pretty fast. And we usually have pilots on board as well, just to make sure that there's any issues. And in general, we haven't had any problems with that. And in particular, when you look at our vertical takeoff and landing drones, they can operate for many, many hours. Most of the time, what they're doing is what's called surveillance and reconnaissance. So getting information for our allies and for the Department of Defense and executing a certain mission for our customers.
What's the biggest difference between the autonomous vehicle market and the autonomous flying market?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So in many ways, they're similar. In many ways, they're different, right? So if you look at the autonomous vehicle market, that's a market which has developed in the more consumer space. The range of risk acceptance is also very different, right? So the number of edge cases that you can have in the vehicle market can be more someone cycling down the road, someone walking, the behaviors of other people. In the aero market, there's a lot more range of motion in terms of, there's almost slack, so to speak. However, as you would expect, it's a highly regulated market, right? So we're all comfortable with the idea of some autonomy. We have autopilots. We're all used to that. But what we're talking about is another level in depth of autonomy. And what we believed when we started Shield, when Shield was started 9 years ago, which has happened, is that autonomy will advance the fastest where the need is the greatest. And the need is the greatest in defense, in national security, for national security reasons, and also because of the regulatory issues you have in the commercial space. We've been working in a range of platforms. And what is exciting about what we're doing is that we'll be flying a lot more jets and different platforms in the coming years.
It's interesting that you say where technology is needed the most, it advances the fastest. And I think it's so true. Like if you look back at different events in history, a lot of technological advancements were sped up because the military needed it at the time.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about GPS, if you think about the internet, if you think about duct tape, think about the microwave. Those are all areas which have been advanced in the defense industry. And that's what's really exciting about what we do. A number of us that are kind of newer defense companies are able to work with a pretty strong, dependable customer and iterate and try out new technologies and advances for a mission. And you'll see that a lot more over the next couple of years. There's a strong focus from the US government, from all our allies, and there's a strong knowledge that technology at the edge, making intelligent decisions is what's going to give us the edge over our adversaries.
What's the state of innovation in the defense industry today? How much of it is, done by private companies and how much is being done by the government itself?
Yeah, so just giving a bit of history of the defense industry, as I mentioned, it's a very critical industry and has been for hundreds of years for the US. After the first Gulf War, there was a concerted effort to consolidate the industry, and there were a number of mergers that happened straight through the 90s into the 2000s, and that creates what we call the primes today, companies like Raytheon, companies like Northrop Grumman. These are fantastic companies doing great work. I mean, they have worked really hard to protect all of us, and we partner with them, and we trust them as well for all our security. But the defense industry is like any other industry, and there is a role for companies like ours that are willing to iterate, take a risk, push the envelope technology-wise. And so you're seeing companies like Palantir, companies like ourselves, companies like Anduril, come with different approaches. And don't need to tell anyone about the role of technology in this industry. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. Look at what's going on in the Ukraine, where intelligence systems have been able to make a huge difference on the ground. And so our ability to iterate, to work with the government has been very, very impactful. But like I say, there's a role for everyone. There's a role for the large primes. There's a role for us. and we partner with a range of companies in everything we do.
This is just one guy who goes deep down YouTube rabbit holes at night, but weren't there like 50, 55-ish like big government contracting agencies? And then at one point, didn't they consolidate down into, isn't that the big five you were describing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, there's, range, whether Raytheon or Northrop Grumman or Lockheed or L3, they've all consolidated very significantly. And it makes sense, right? So if you have a company that is working primarily with the government as taxpayers, we should make sure that there's maximum value for impact. And so we work very closely with the regulators to make sure that we're charging government a fair amount. In addition to that, you also need innovation, right? If you look at what's happened with our adversaries around the world, so in many ways, they've been able to take more risk, right? By taking more risk, they've been able to advance the technology stack. And one of the things that we say at Shield is that the greatest victory is no war. By having cutting edge technology that is up to speed with adversaries and better, you deter the enemy from taking an action because people war game what could happen. And so all of the work we do is to make sure that we are protected and our way of life continues.
For the industry that you're in, is the biggest customer the government? Is there like a number 2 and number 3 biggest customer? Maybe they're a lot smaller, but just trying to size up who's buying these products.
Yeah, so primarily, like I said, we believe that innovation will begin and has begun very much in the defense industry. The technology that we develop can be used in commercial use cases, can be used in even use cases like on ground transportation as well, or in maritime environments. Our focus over the last few years has been primarily in the defense industry. We do have contracts that are more commercial in nature. I just can't go through the exact detail. And we see that as a launch pad for many, many other areas that we can operate. One of the things I should just note about what we do relative to a more established company like a Northrop Grumman is that the amount of research and development we do relative to our revenue as a ratio is about 30 times of Northrop Grumman. So we have invested and are investing very heavily in our technology stack, both in the hardware, in our vertical takeoff and landing drone, which is called a VBAT, but also in the autonomy stack. And we're really, really excited by what we've built and how many different ways it can be applied to lots of different use cases. So one of the things that we're really focused on in the next year and a half is really expanding that moat and expanding the number of companies that we work with. But like I say, primarily now we are delighted to serve and provide to the US government and our allies.
I love how you were hitting on, Kingsley, that it can start as something that the government or the military uses, but it can expand to commercial use cases. I remember I was listening to Mark Andreessen talking about a drone company that they had funded back in the day. And he said, listen, this was primarily for the government at first, but then we said, hey, why wouldn't we want to use a drone for, say, oil rigs instead of sending someone there, or a drone for a telecom tower instead of having a person climb up, or a drone for, a cop who's chasing someone who might go on a roof. So you can see how things start as an innovation that's for maybe the government or what's being funded by taxpayer money, but then there are commercial contracts you can gain from it.
Yeah, I think he was talking about Shield.
He was. Okay.
Yeah. So A16Z led our Series A, and they've just been phenomenal backers for us. And so, yeah. So, absolutely. We've been working with Andreessen Horowitz or A16Z for many, many years. And the entire American dynamism, the approach of let's build something, real in America that is hard, right? Hardware is not easy. Innovation across hardware and software, something that obviously we've been part of and just deeply resonates with all of us in the team. Yeah.
And you told me that freedoms are worth fighting for. So I'm curious, defense and national security are great sectors to build careers in, it sounds like, but it's probably not something that people coming out of college just have, at the top of the list. And it's probably an awareness thing. Can you just talk through why you think the sector you operate in is a good one to build a career in?
Yeah. So, just a little bit about me. So I, like every executive in our company, have an engineering degree. Even our chief people officer has an engineering degree. And I've just been always really passionate about problem solving, learning new things, and having an impact, right? And so I think you'd struggle to think of a career that could give you all three more than the defense industry. The work we do is real, is valued by our customer, is impactful on the field. And importantly, it saves lives, right? So our mission is to protect 7 men and women with intelligent systems. It's something that we know we have done. We have deployed our technology in the field, and we know it's saved lives and is saving lives at the moment. And so knowing that I'm having an impact as opposed to just receiving the news and kind of feeling good or bad about it and posting a meme about it is just really powerful to me. Secondly, when you work with super smart people to like I say, push the envelope technologically, right? Because the defense industry is and has been that accelerating sector for new technologies, is just really, really enjoyable.
Kingsley, did you say everyone's an engineer, even your chief people officer?
Yeah, so we've got 10 execs and everyone has an engineering degree, engineering or computer science degree. Our chief legal officer has a computer science degree. Our PX officer has an industrial engineering degree. And it's just great because, you have a common problem solving template, right? So we're the data doesn't inform all decisions, but the data has to be there, right? So we always start with the data, and then we can talk and critique the accuracy of the data, the degree in which it could be correct or incorrect. And then we have a discussion about the decision. And so that helps a lot. So,
wow. I can only imagine what those conversations are like at the dinner table when appetizers are coming out. Just a bunch of engineers nerding out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe we could talk a bit about how Shield AI makes money. So what are the revenue lines that you have? You were speaking to like there are jets, there are different ways to put AI and automation into vehicles, but what are the revenue lines you actually look at?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a couple of lines. So as I mentioned, we make a vertical takeoff and landing, what's called a Group 3 drone, right? And so we've been selling that for a while, and that's a normal sort of you sell the drone and you recognize revenue perspective. All our drones are equipped with our core software stack called HiveMind. So there is a software component there as well. We can put HiveMind on other third-party platforms as well, which is something that we're looking at. In addition, we own and put on our balance sheet a number of our drones to execute a mission. So that's where we work with our partners, and we have people on a ship. I can't say where they are deployed, and that's kind of company owned, company operated, and that's another way of driving revenue. What we focus on is being there as a solution for our customers and for what we call programs of record. That's a very important phrase in this industry. And so all our revenue stack feeds into supporting these programs. In general, as we're going through the next couple of years, you'll see a great acceleration in our software growth. And there's a long debate about, hardware revenue versus software revenue and what's its valued. And, I just love all revenue and I love all profit. And so we really see our hardware sales supported by our software sales and vice versa. And so what we're focused on as a team is growing top line strongly and doing that in a way that expands margin and expands profitability over time.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Cash is king. As the CFO of a SaaS company, I know firsthand how important it is to maintain a healthy AR balance. If you can't effectively manage cash, you can't service debt, make payroll, or invest in growing your business. That's why I'm so excited to partner with the sponsor of today's episode, Maxio, the leading billing and financial operations platform for B2B SaaS. Maxio helps top SaaS companies like Chili Piper, Crunchbase, and Stack Overflow get cash in the door faster by automating collections and dunning. Gone are the days of manually chasing down invoices. Join the 2,500 plus subscription businesses using Maxio, formerly SaaS Optics and Chargeify, to eliminate revenue leakage and streamline order to cash. It's never been easier to get paid. Visit maxio.com/run the numbers to supercharge your financial operations in 2024. Not only does requesting a demo using the Run the Numbers link help support this podcast, ya boy, you also receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. Woo! That's maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Okay, serious question for all my accounting pros here today. Are you doing what you were hired to do? What I mean is, do you have time to actually be a business partner, or are you buried in tedious manual tasks just to get your journal entries prepared every month? I know how that feels. Leapfin's here to help with that. Leapfin is accounting automation software that automatically prepares and posts reliable journal entries. And that's just the beginning. High-growth businesses like Reddit, Canva, and Seat Geek choose Leapfin to eliminate manual tasks, accelerate month-end close, and enable accounting leaders like you to provide faster insights that will help your company grow. If you're battling messy transaction data from Stripe, Adyen, Shopify, Apple Pay, and other PSPs, and then battling again to get it all into NetSuite, go to leapfin.com to watch their short product intro video. And if you like what you see, request a 15-minute conversation to learn how accounting automation can help you and your team. Check out leapfin.com today. That's leap like jump, fin like shark. I just made that up. I hope they're okay with it. Leapfin.com. Ready to plan confidently, close faster, and report more accurately? Here's what sets Planful apart. Imagine purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. It's easy to implement Planful in just weeks and with minimal IT involvement, so you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business on your key financial progress. Best of all, Planful grows with you. Its unparalleled scalability ensures that no matter how fast your business expands, Planful can keep up. See why over 1,500 customers worldwide choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Oh yeah! Go to planful.com/metrics to see how you can reach peak financial performance with Planful. That's planful.com/metrics. This must be a pretty tricky model to forecast for. I mean, do you have to sell something pretty large with hardware and then you sell the software later? Is that usually kind of the pattern of how a sale goes?
Yeah, it depends. So what happens is when you work in that industry is that you give a proposal for a complete proposal. So that will have things like maintenance costs. They will have things like the software components, the hardware components. And that's where those relationships really come to bear. And that's one of the benefits of the defense industry is that you can really work with the contracting office to craft something that makes sense for the customer. In terms of forecasting, yes, there is the hardware component, and then you have different variants that come out, and then you have to kind of predict when the different variants are going to land. But in general, again, another benefit of the defense industry is that it buys in a multi-year approach. So a program of record is usually multi-year. It's a line item in the budget, and you have levels of predictability. We're delighted to announce one a couple of weeks ago for the U.S. Coast Guard, which is a program of record, and we have a number of other programs of record as well. And so you have the normal kind of software predictability aspect, and you align that with kind of the defense industry kind of quasi predictability that comes from programs of record, gives you visibility to predict into the future.
You know, we talk to a lot of CFOs who come from a pretty strict just SaaS background, and they talk about, deal desks and approving deals and coming up with proposals. Yours is like on steroids when you have to come up with a proposal, I'm guessing, for the government that's multi-year and millions of dollars.
Yeah, and I think that sort of dovetails in the way that we like to run finance here at Shield, right? Which is that Ed Rapp, who was the president of Caterpillar, was my audit chair at my last company. And he said that financial statements is just a summary of decisions that you made in the past. And a good CFO informs those decisions before you're reading them in a financial statement. And so we embed our team. I have a pricing team that works very, very closely with our business development team around our proposals. Also have a program finance team that works very closely with our program management team to make sure that the programs are on track in terms of where we're tracking on cost, schedule, and performance. We have an operational finance team that is embedded in our operations, in our manufacturing plants, that is real-time giving data to the supply chain team and the production team. Because like you say, we have to be very careful from a hardware perspective as well as a software perspective. And working capital management can be a killer for hardware companies, right? And we saw that in the supply chain disruption of 2 or 3 years ago, just after the COVID crisis. So putting the finance team embedded with operations, embedded with the team upstream means you get better decision making.
I love talking about cash conversion cycle, but most of the CFOs I talk to are missing that third piece, the inventory. What are some of the nuances of your business when it comes to managing working capital?
Yeah. Your suppliers and your customers are partners in the dance of your survival.
Ooh, that's a hot one. I like that.
So, you have to have a strategic relationship with them. You have to grow with them. And often they may want to have predictability. you have to have empathy for them. If you have a large contract coming, very often the suppliers have to tool up on their end, have to invest in their own supply chain. And so we have a very partnership approach with our suppliers. We have a pretty good process in making sure we balance the demand on one end with the investment that's required. One of the things that we did last year, we raised our last round was in December, was 300 million of equity and 200 million of debt. And our equity round was massively oversubscribed, and we closed off the round. And the reason why we lean into debt is, if you think about an inventory business, a hardware business, a hardware and software business, the cost of capital is really impactful, right? So using equity at whatever higher cost of equity to purchase inventory it doesn't always make sense. And so we were very fortunate to get a facility together, their facility together. And so we lean into that at certain points when we need to buy a bit more inventory to support our working capital.
Wow. I just want to flag that for listeners. It's such a good call out, because a lot of times it actually doesn't make sense to use your equity to purchase certain things. Like it could be an acquisition, it could be working capital, but to your point, tapping into debt is just a better trade-off, especially if you're thinking that your company is on a really good trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. One has to be very careful. Obviously, with debt, that has people have get quite worried with the concept of debt. But we deal with debt all the time when we buy a home, right? Even if you were very wealthy, you would often have some amount of debt you would raise. And we see our equity providers and our debt providers as people who've invested in our business as well, right? And so we're very respectful to them. So
I like how you called it out as a partnership and that you have to have empathy, because a lot of times when you think about negotiations with suppliers, you're trying to, people think it's kind of in the movies where you're trying to turn the screws to them and get the best deal possible. But to your point, you can actually be asking them to make a sizable commitment to scale up operations. Hey, I just got this big contract, and they look at it like, great, but also I hope this comes through because I could grow into the ground trying to make my infrastructure big enough to support your contract. Like, it goes both ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the joys and the challenges of being in finance and also operations in a company like ours is that things are changing all the time, right? There's this concept of the OODA loop, right? So it's observe, orient, decide, act. And so you have to the company and the groups, the leadership team that can iterate around the OODA loop as fast as possible, will do better, right? And so you're always checking in with the suppliers. I work very closely with our chief operating officer on that, and also checking in with your customers to make sure you get paid on time, right? The good thing about the government will pay you. Might be a bit delayed, but the government will pay you for sure. So
it's funny you say that, because even though some of the contracts, I guess, aren't recurring in nature, it's not technically SaaS, but I mean, people depend on T-bills and the government as a pretty solid source of income. So you have that going for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, with the programs of record, we do have many recurring type features in our revenue streams. And what we do build is just a deep relationship with our customer in all ends.
Are there any other companies in your ecosystem that you look at as paving the way for other defense industry companies like yourselves? Like I'm familiar with Anduril, I'm familiar with Palantir, but who else is out there for other people who may be listening saying, like, this is an industry I'd love to work with in finance?
Yeah. I have to double click on the Palantir shout out because they've been very thoughtful in working with the government on how to buy software, right? So traditionally, the government's very used to buying a platform, and Palantir and Anduril and us have done a lot of work in equipping the government to think about that in a new way. Outside of us, there's a company called Skydio. That's a great company that I think they do kind of smaller drones. They've been working very well in the industry. There are a couple of newer companies that are a bit smaller. There's a lady called Nini Hamrick who runs a company called Vannevar Labs. Nini was at business school with me, and one of my board members tools us both decision making. So I have to give her a shout out. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. So Kingsley, I was doing some research, and you have an extensive investment banking career. And you've raised a lot of capital as a CFO. Do you have any stories of note just about deal making? People love these.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I worked in London and also I lived in Switzerland and did a number of transactions. mostly in Europe, Middle East, and Africa, but also in Asia and South America. The first of all is that the historical context matters, right? The thing about Europe, you travel 45 minutes and there's a completely different culture and language and different context. So one example is Austria and Hungary, right next to each other. They used to be one country, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. There's an oil company in Austria called OMV, and there's an oil company in Hungary called MOL. And logically, they should just merge with each other because they're right next to each other. And, I advised OMV on the bid to MOL. Complete reaction. It was just historical sort of anathema to people to have an Austrian company buying a Hungarian company and wanted to have a Hungarian national champion. And I remember when we were preparing the bid and preparing the bid letter, obviously we had no Austrians or Hungarians in the team, and it just didn't occur to us as bankers that there would be this reaction. And so we were kind of surprised by that. So history really, really matters. The other thing that's very interesting about working across in different deals is that, at least when I was in Europe, the base law for sales and purchase agreements was English and Welsh law. Because the European Union has so many different languages, and so the language that people speak to each other when they meet each other is English. And so I actually had an advantage over other people because I'm a native English speaker. I know English and Welsh law. And so in negotiations, it was pretty helpful. And finally, and I'm sure everyone who listens to your podcast does this, is like, read the SBA, read the document over and over and over again. A lot of people tend to subcontract that away to lawyers as opposed to kind of getting really, really into detail. And so that's something that, I've tried in my career for sure, to go very, very deep in the docs. And I always catch something that can be highly impactful for my customers and for my client, for my company.
That's a great PSA. Read the docs. Even if you're paying your lawyers tons and tons of money, like, it's your responsibility too.
Especially if you're paying your lawyers tons and tons of money, because then you can add value to the negotiation, give them, because you know the operations, you know what you're trying to buy. The lawyers don't, right? So you have to have ownership over it.
Have you worked in Asia as well?
Yeah. I did some work in Thailand, did some work in Asia, like in the Middle East as well, in India. So
it feel, or what I've heard anecdotally, I've never done any deals over there, that the deal making process and cultural norms for even just beginning conversation about deals, that can be quite different than something in the US.
So I think one thing I would say is that there are often non-obvious power structures in cultures outside of the US, right? So one of my clients in the Middle East will come to every meeting with his wife, who never said anything. But she was actually the most person who was making many of the decisions in hindsight, right? And when you work, I've done a lot of work in Southeast Asia as well, just understanding, for example, the pattern by which people take material to the head of the team or the head of the company. It's not a linear approach. There are often people in different individual offices that needs to be brought along. And if you are doing coverage work as a banker, frankly, in any role, treat people like humans and understand the human dynamic so that you can execute your goal.
What was the term you used? Non-obvious power structures?
Yeah. Yes.
No, that's great, because I'm just reacting to it live. I feel like there have been deals that I've done in the past where the title of the person didn't really, it didn't really equate to what they were doing and what their say was in a deal.
Yeah. No, it's exactly right. And you can pay for LinkedIn and do a bit more, looking around to see how people are connected to who. Maybe the person who went to high school with the founder and is now having a role that you don't really sure why they're in the room, or someone who was really, really impactful for the leadership team in another transaction that can be brought in to check things out. And so those dynamics just takes a little bit of extra time to work out those dynamics, but you can be very impactful when you do that.
We were talking to Guido Torini, the CFO of One Trust and formerly Salonis, and he was telling a story about doing a deal. I think it was in Northern Africa. And before they could talk business, he had to go to that person's daughter's birthday party just to show that, like, he was a good guy.
Yeah. Oh, if you get invited to a party, go. Don't get drunk.
I love just the stories, though, about negotiating abroad, because I don't know, in the US there tends to be these cultural norms that are pushed on people about like having bravado and like these take it or leave it deals, but they're much more nuanced in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Usually, unless you're a used car salesman, you're going to build a relationship with this person or with this company. And so you want to make sure that relationship makes sense for you, of course, and fight for your corner, of course. And you can do so in a way that feels fair to both sides. So that's how I negotiate, and that's how I like to work in general. So.
Yeah. Did your experience as an investment banker making deals, did that impact at all the way that you've raised capital for the firms you've worked at?
Yeah, for sure. So companies often leave off raising as much capital as they can when it's available to them. The world has been and is becoming much more volatile than it was in the past. And so balancing the confidence to take risk with the understanding of how unpleasant things can get when I call it oxygen, I don't call it capital. When oxygen leaves the room, is very, very important. And just seeing that from a relatively young age in my career, working with CEOs and CFOs, and seeing them grapple with those decisions, and seeing leadership across many countries around the world really deal with the same thing. How do I grow my business? How do I get the right team? How am I going to be impactful? What's going to be my legacy? Has been really, really powerful for my career now.
I've worked with some CEOs who say when someone offers you money at a really good price, just take it, put it in the bank and forget about it. It's hard to forget about it, but I guess the saying is what the saying is. Would you agree that in times that you can get money, just take it because it's kind of like storing up oxygen? Or what's your mindset on like raising more money versus less?
So it's an interesting balance, right? Because you want to make sure you've got oxygen to live. But as Peter Levine, who works at Andreessen, A16Z, and taught me at Stanford, says, startups more often die from indigestion than they do from starvation. And so, which I thought was really good. And so there's a kind of a mania that at some times people get. Thankfully we don't have that. Ryan and Brandon, who run this company, are pretty prudent. There's a mania people get when they have a lot of cash. And I would caution against that, because you have to think through with every investment, what's the return timeline? Am I the best company to do X or Y thing? And so, I think there is a case for turning away more capital than you need. Every dollar that I have raised or we've raised here at Shield is a promise, and we take those promises very, very seriously. And we want to make a great return for our investors. So
I think it's the Charlie Munger quote. It takes great courage to have all that cash and do nothing with it.
Right. Exactly.
Burning a hole in your pocket. I want to touch on career building a bit. You had floated this idea to me of a personal board of directors, and I thought it was a beautiful idea. Can you describe what that is?
A personal board of directors are people you deeply respect, you trust, and you can craft them to support you. There are many areas in business where a completely new approach to doing things is fantastic. Finance is not one of those areas.
I love that.
I could assure you, any challenge you're facing in finance, someone has faced it before in almost a similar way, and you can tap into that knowledge. Avail yourself of the wisdom of others. And so what I do includes my parents. My parents are both accountants, includes my parents, and a number of current and old CFOs of companies significantly larger than mine. And I have a pretty set calendar when I reach out to them. So now my secret is out, they will know. So for them, it feels like they're speaking to me once every 5 or 6 months, but there's a cadence. I'm speaking to lots of different people, so I make sure it's not a burden on them. And I take so much wisdom from them every time I speak, specifically companies that are quite large now, but started off as startups that are in like the hardware and hardware software interface space. Those individuals have been highly impactful for me. And like I said, my parents are both accountants, and so I get to lean into them as well.
Tactical question here for someone looking to build his own personal board of directors. Do you tell them that you think of them in that way? Or is it like in your head, you're just saying like, this person is, I'm using them as my personal board of directors. I may not phrase it to them that way, but I'm going to go to them on a regular basis for advice.
Yeah. So in my experience, a couple of things and maybe particularly in the US, people like directness and people want to give back. So people care about their legacy. So I'm very specific when I'm talking to people that, I'm turning to you because you have something I do not have. You have perspective, which often comes with time, and you have experience and you've built something phenomenal. I'm also very respectful of their time. And so whenever we speak, I prepare what my core questions are going to be before then. And I'm very targeted. And if I don't have anything to ask them, I don't use their time inappropriately. I always circle back and I always thank them very deeply. And I mean that. So I don't use the words personal board of directors. It kind of just seems quite formal, but I'm very open about, collecting advice to grow. And by the way, I do that too. So I play that role for many people. I've been honored to play that role for many people who are also nascent in their careers. So something I highly recommend.
Do you have any favorite questions or questions that you've asked that have been most impactful to you?
Yeah. How to deal with a change in cast of characters as you go through your career. What you'll find is, as I said, the world is becoming more and more volatile. Companies adapt, they grow. If the company's not doing well, new characters come in. If the company is doing well, new characters come in. And each character has their own positions and their hopes and their fears. And just understanding, because in the finance seat, right, you have often in the startup, things are change and they're volatile and timelines have to move around. But then you have these like solid walls, investors, the board, the market if you're public. And in between the two is finance. And so being able to speak to both ends is something that's very critical. So that's an area I lean in.
I like how you said that finance is a career where people have seen the curveballs before. So you're not reinventing the wheel. And what you can also do is come up with a list of people who have probably dealt with similar problems because of the business model you're in. So I think it's really cool that you found people at the intersection of hardware and software. So it's just a flag for other people out there. Like, think about your business model.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, spot on.
Do you think the way that people build careers will change at all with the advent of AI? I know that you're at the forefront of working with AI, so maybe you can tell people what we might see here.
Yeah, so I'm an AI optimist. I think a lot of people, there's all this sort of very negative views. And in history, whenever we've had new technology, there are jobs that we haven't even imagined yet, which are going to come to replace the jobs that are going to potentially be obsolete. To me, I think what we're going to see is the ability to have a core set of skills and a core set of values, more importantly, and surround that with a sea of flexibility is going to stand you in good stead. And so I've been very fortunate to work across a range of sectors: energy, transportation, industrials, aerospace and defense. I've worked across multiple countries. And I think that's just going to carry on being the case, and being open and being frankly excited about change and about relearning and reskilling up, I think is going to be the most critical thing. We should obviously be very thoughtful about the ethics of AI, and we are very, very thoughtful about it. But change is good. Change has been good for our species. And so we should carry on leaning into that.
Change is good. I think it's the pace of change that tends to scare people.
Yeah. Yes, it can feel overwhelming how quickly it changes. And there are always new areas where you can apply your core skills and expertise. And so I like learning and growing. That's what motivates me. So bring on the change.
Are you incorporating AI in any way into the finance department, how you do work today?
Yeah. So, I mean, it wouldn't surprise you to hear that we definitely are, right? So a lot of it's stuff that we're doing ourselves in-house. So ways that we can review AJs, user access right reviews, things like that, using AI. And, you can accelerate processes as you go through. One of the goals that we've set ourselves in the finance team is how do we support the business to grow very significantly without any incremental heads, right? So it's people, processes, and systems. If you're not going to increase the number of people, you have to lean into your systems and become more productive. So we're doing that internally, as I said, with AI. we're also working with a range of other companies as well and new suppliers. So
something as a CFO that I get a bit trepidatious about is I want to avoid buyer's remorse, right? So I see everything coming out and I'm like, oh, I want to buy that, like the shiny new object that's going to increase productivity for my team. And then a month later, I see something even better come out. How do you deal with that when assessing like new tools that come out for your company or for the finance department and saying like, yeah, we should buy that versus maybe we wait a little bit and see if something better comes out?
By rigorously assessing impacts when you buy things, right? So in my experience, when you deploy a new technology, you need a body of time to see the impact of what you're doing. And inaction is action, is a choice. I'm a big fan of like, yes, something that's out now might not be the most perfect version, but is that thing going to be impactful for you today? Yes, no. If yes, then the next question is, how do I sign up to a commitment that isn't like a 10-year commitment or a 5-year commitment? How do I build in as much flexibility as possible? Then you go ahead. And so, you just need to get the best you can today and be open and have built flexibility to get something better tomorrow. But choosing to pause and not leaning into changes has always been a mistake that I've been trying to avoid in my career.
Yeah, I like how you said that inaction is also a choice, but you also have to realize the cost of that inaction of not doing something.
Correct.
Kingsley, what I'm going to do is take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So
go for it.
You're a successful guy, but I ask everybody, you got to give me one thing that you've screwed up in your career. It could be this job or anyone prior.
Something I screw up every morning. We all make mistakes. I'd say insurance. That's an area where you can
say more. Okay.
Yeah, no. So as your company changes, you will need more and more coverage, and various brokers will push a lot of things on you. And I think some points in my career, being slightly overcharged for insurance, and just like really, really understanding the risks and really leaning very hard on your broker to make sure you're not overcharged can save you a lot of money. So insurance is an area where I didn't maybe lean in as much as I could in the past, but I'm leaning in hard for sure.
This is such a good one. I remember I was working at a cybersecurity company once, and we were negotiating our cyber insurance, and it was like some crazy big number they wanted coverage on. Right. And I remember we all stepped back from it at one point, and we're like, wait, like, isn't this more of like a binary outcome that if like the business wouldn't exist, like if it was that bad, like you have to underwrite some level of risk.
Right. Exactly. Right. The job as finance is to protect the company, but not overpay for things. And insurance is, what's your insurance? It's my number one advice.
Yeah. I have noticed though that in the past 2 years, the level of D&O, directors and officers, I think it stands for insurance, that's been going up that VCs have been asking for. Yeah,
no, for sure. That's also because a lot of the risk has been going up. It is coming down a little bit more as well. And actually with the D&O insurance, that's somewhere you should really drill in, because there's certain scenarios where you do not have coverage. All right. And so often there's maybe some coverage that is a little bit more expensive, but actually covers a broader use case. So that D&O is definitely an area where like focus will be impactful for you.
Yeah, that's a great one. No one's brought up insurance on the podcast. I'm glad you brought it up because it's super tactical and valuable to people. Next one I got for you. If you could tell your younger self something, knowing what you know today, what would you tell him?
Chill out.
Everyone says that who's successful, which is hilarious to me.
Okay, travel. Leave the UK early. I love the UK. It's a country I call home. And there is wisdom in the whole world. So just working across the world and leaning in has been great ride. So
I like all of those. On the chill out one, I joke because that's my advice to myself. But I go back to like when Elon Musk was doing like the SNL Open, and he's like, did you expect the guy who wanted to send people to Mars and build electric cars was going to be like a real chill guy?
Yeah. I mean, it's all relative, but you should chill out too. So anyway, chill out. That'll be fun.
Yeah. I'm trying my best. I don't know. I've had 3 coffees today. Can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools does your team use to get the job done?
So we just recently brought on Corpay to do sort of payment processing. We use the usual sort of ERPs and everything. I don't want to go through the exact names of the software that we use.
Yeah. Cool. Are you a big systems and software guy? Like, do you have like opinions on what the org in general uses? Like, how do you think the CFO should play a role in deciding tools?
Well, it's actually a very critical part of the CFO's job, right? As ICGC, so IT General Controls, are one of the key parts that auditors look at. as you kind of progress to being a public company, something called kind of 404A, 404B SOX. And IT is basically IT, right? And so the CFO needs to be very, very deep into the systems and software and the risk. You know, we work in the national security industry, but for all of us, there are protecting the data of our customers and the data of our employees is super, super critical. The way I think about my job is to be the person who wakes up at night worrying about everything. And if you're not worried about your IT systems, I don't know what you're worried about.
I've said that's probably the biggest change in the evolution of my job over even the last 6 months. So we're going through SOC 2 right now. We're also going through our first financial audit. But on the SOC 2 side of things, it's thinking through what are like the counterparty risks that you also have with IT systems. And that just like was not a world that, I don't know. I think like when you're a startup and you're like seed, Series A, Series B, it's like, can we survive to live another day? And then as you get bigger, you have to think about these other existential things that often do involve IT.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right.
Last one I got for you. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense at any company?
A bungee jump. Enough said. A full-on like bungee jump equipment scenario.
It wasn't like just a day out where they were jumping off a cliff like for a tour. Like they bought bungee equipment.
It was an engineer buying bungee equipment. That's all I can say. Yeah, so.
Wow. Imagine that for like a weekend activity, just jumping off of platforms and cliffs and ledges. Kingsley, this has been amazing. You took me deep into an industry that I knew nothing about. I'm going to go down a lot more YouTube rabbit holes. I got to watch a lot of the jets that your company flies on YouTube last night, and that was pretty nuts to watch. But thanks for being generous with your time and going into this world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the questions, and thank you very much.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, LOL. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.